And we continue our education roundtables today by speaking with the Indian River County Superintendent, Dr. David Moore. He is joining us live. Dr. Moore, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation.
So one concern that as we've gone through these education roundtables, and one thing that we did hear when we spoke to students, some of the ones that were in school, was that sometimes the rules, the coronavirus, the pandemic rules weren't really being followed that much when teachers weren't looking. When teachers would walk away, kids would sort of congregate together. And there's been concern, as we've seen across the country, about pandemic fatigue, that people are just getting sick of wearing masks and sick of social distancing. What are you seeing in your schools?
We have to have the endurance to work together as we move through these unprecedented times. And you're right, mask fatigue, pandemic fatigue is a real thing. So for us, it's a constant reminder as to taking the additional provisions to keep everyone safe. Wear a mask when social distancing is impossible. Continue to wash your hands, social distancing, and really create environments in our school where it is encouraging and rewarding. And in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of such a different time, it is stressful. It is stressful on everyone that is in the building. Our teachers and students feel the burden of that stress the absolute most. So it's being very intentional of always reminding us why we have to take these steps, because we don't want to close the doors to our schools.
Another concern that we heard from students and parents of those that were remote learning was that it just felt like as much as they're going to school, as much as they're trying, that they're falling behind. And the kids that spent some time remote learning and then came to brick and mortar felt like they were learning a lot more in brick and mortar. How do you address concerns that the kids that are staying home to be safe don't feel like they're getting the same experience?
I think it's important to come to the understanding, as we all, as district leaders, created plans at the beginning of the school year for an unknown reality. And we would be selling our community short if we don't take the time to evaluate and learn as we implement these particular plans. In Indian River County, we started with about 62% of our students in brick and mortar. Now we're up to 78%. And that was intentionally looking at the data, listening to parents and listening to students, and creating an environment for all children to find success. And it was us, encouraging students to return to school, have the opportunity to visit and see that it is, in fact, a safe space in which students can be safe and be involved in productive learning, while at the same time, for families who didn't have that level of comfort as it relates to being healthy in schools, creating those environments through technology that allowed them to have meaningful instruction taking place. In some scenarios in the Indian River County, we have two different options. It was moving a student from a virtual environment, which is a platform-driven process with an educator providing support as needed, to a more explicit model, which we call our transitional model, which is a typical classroom experience delivered through our Canvas platform. So more traditional one-on-one instruction, classroom instruction taking place. So it was blending those two models to ensure when students thought they were going to be successful in one model but weren't finding that success, we had to work with those families really to get them in spaces where they can be successful. And honestly, we continue to do that work.
And do you find that as the months are going by, that students are becoming more comfortable and finding something that works for them?
We have to be intentional. And as we look at the data, there are, it's us, taking ourselves out into the community, knocking on doors and saying, hey, let's really look at this model. The success that you're not experiencing doesn't mean that we have to continue to live in that reality. Let's work together and find that space. And make no mistake about it, 4, 5 weeks, even days in an environment in which a student isn't finding success is a lost day. And we can't allow ourselves to continue or expand that loss of time. So it is working with families in the midst of this unprecedented time to find educational environments that are both safe and where families feel comfortable, while at the same time providing meaningful instruction to students.
I know this is a tough one, but one thing that we heard from parents and teachers was that it was really frustrating how things around them kept changing. A lot of times teachers would be said that they were finding out what was going on in their own classroom last minute. They seemed like they were the last ones to know. Are you aware of some of those concerns that they are just a little bit behind in trying to find out what's going on? And is there anything that can be done to fix that for the future?
Yeah, and I think we own that. And I think we look at every single opportunity that we have as an opportunity to learn. We want our teachers to be informed when a student unfortunately has to be quarantined as a result of the health department's contact tracing. We want those teachers to know immediately so they can begin to access that student through Canvas, through our technology, providing the lessons to them so they can continue to provide in order to continue to have that in instruction. We don't look at anything in our system in the midst of this pandemic as, well, that's just how it is. For us, it's always, how do we do better? We know it's a temporary situation that's going on almost a year at this point. But at the same time, we have to be in the moment, evaluating our actions and learning how to improve upon the services we're providing to everybody, just not students, but to teachers. And if we can't keep our teachers in a place where they feel informed and understand not only where we're currently at, but where we're going, we're not going to be in the best interest of children.
It's hard to keep them informed when we're waiting for the governor to make up his mind about what's going to happen in January. Are you preparing for the possibility that remote learning will not be an option starting at the beginning of the year?
We're in the midst of a growing number of individuals testing positive on a daily basis. To shift or modify what we're currently doing now, I don't think would be in the best interest of any one school system or school district. You're right, we don't have that information now. We continue to work with the state and really make a strong case. If we're going to continue to be flexible to meet the needs, all needs of families, we need to continue to provide this opportunity to all children in an environment in which they feel comfortable.
But if the governor doesn't decide to extend remote learning after the end of this calendar year, how does that change schools in Indian River County?
Well, it becomes a very long, hard conversation, and it ties back to funding. It ties back to access and equity. We need to ensure, one of the good things we have going for us is 78% of our students are in brick and mortar. But those 22%, we want to keep them where they're at. So we will have a worst case scenario plan, meaning that funding will no longer be provided, or the allowance to receive full funding would no longer be allowed available, and then plan accordingly to ensure that we're able to bring our students back.
Speaking of funding, how are you right now with PPE in your schools, and how does it affect your budget going forward if there's no more federal help?
No more federal help would really hurt. And make no mistakes about it, we are in a situation in which we don't know what the impact of our current budget is going to be as it relates to COVID. We've designed a budget, we've allocated resources for the course of this school year, but we're still pending a possible reduction in that allocation for this particular school year. So that would be yet another opportunity to pause and reshift and reshuffle how we're doing things. So we need that information from the state. We need information regarding how we're going to be able to provide those virtual models moving forward. For us, PPE, it is a constant conversation with our principals, working with our warehouse to make sure those materials and resources are always available. And is it a burden? Is it stress? Is it an additional funding source? The answer to that question is yes.
So if there is no more federal funding, where does the money get turned in the budget?
It's those discretionary funds, and as a principal, you want to maximize your experience at your school site to be individualized to meet the needs of those kids at your school. And principals are going to begin to lose some of that flexibility if those above and beyond dollars aren't allocated to provide that PPE, as well as, in terms of the additional things that or supplemental resources or technology from a district perspective. It is, something we continue to monitor and have a plan to not purchase resources or supplies in order to ensure that we have the PPE if that be the case.
As you were saying before, the effort is to try to find the best way for the students in Indian River County to find success and stay safe, during this time. As we have been talking to some students and some, other administrators, we have seen that some students are really thriving in remote learning. Do you see that there's going to be more remote learning after we go through all this?
Absolutely. You look at students who are thriving in this virtual instructional model. You also look at professionals who are also thriving in that professional setting from home. And I think businesses and organizations have learned, we can continue to allow individuals to work from anywhere while minimizing cost and maximizing salary and profit. So if anything, from a school system perspective, we need to prepare students to be successful in what today's reality is becoming. We can't continue to say this is temporary or this too shall pass. There are things that we are going to learn if we allow ourselves as a system to learn, that will ultimately allow us to be more effective at preparing the needs of our students moving forward.
What do you think is the biggest thing that you've learned through all this?
Really, that leading in a pandemic is absolutely not fun at all. To be honest with you, it's hard. It's complex. It is ever changing. As soon as you create a plan, you communicate and build consensus around that particular plan. It's almost becomes an immediate response to shift or modify that plan. Outthinking COVID and setting targets and goals as it relates to when we will move away from a mask mandate or return all students to school isn't the reality. If we would have thought that we'd be at a higher percent daily positive rate when school started going in 2 months, I don't think anyone would have said that they thought that would be the reality, but here we are.
This is not what you signed up for?
I signed up for for the job. So, finishing the first year, prior to COVID hitting, I was only the superintendent for about 40 days of the students being in school before we had to actually shut down and shift the school. But as we have moved through this pandemic, what I have learned that this is an absolute outstanding organization with outstanding families and community members who are willing to listen and put their shoulder to the same wheel as me and figure out ways to continue to improve the quality of instruction for our students here in the county of Indian River.
Well, Dr. Moore, continue good luck to you, also your staff and the teachers, students, and the parents up there in Indian River County. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks, sir.